Hello, it's Kristin and welcome back to my channel. Today we're making Christollen Scones. To a large bowl, add the all-purpose flour. You're going to want a kitchen scale for this recipe. All of the ingredients are listed in the description box below. You can also find them on my Instagram, which will be tagged at the end. Next, add the baking powder, salt, and spices. Then mix well. Add the granulated sugar, and the lemon zest, and mix until evenly incorporated. Next, add the cold cubed butter. You're going to want to work quickly at this point since the butter will start melting since you're kind of rubbing it around the flour. And you want it to be a nice crumb consistency when you're done incorporating the big cubes. I was going to cut this process because it is kind of long, but I figured maybe you'd want to see the whole thing kind of sped up as opposed to me cutting it to the final product. So there shouldn't be any large chunks of butter left. They should be kind of in flakes or pea-sized pieces, as the world says. But as long as there are no big chunks, you're A-okay. And as long as it's not greasy, you're double A-okay. Next, add the rum-soaked raisins and citrus peel. So you're going to want to marinate the citrus peels and the raisins overnight in rum if you decide to use it. If you don't, you can just add it normally and not marinate it. Then add the slivered almond pieces and mix until evenly incorporated. Then add the egg, milk, and vanilla mixture into a little well in the middle. I was going to save about a teaspoon for the end to brush the tops, but I did notice that the dough was a little bit dry, so I ended up using all of the liquid. This part is really important when you're incorporating the liquid. You just want to make slicing motions. You don't really want to rub the dough together. It's really important not to build too much gluten at this point because you want your scones to be light and fluffy. So just use quick slicing motions. It may not look like it's going to incorporate, but it will. Then use a rubber scraper to pat the dough together and all the excess flour. And you can just press it down as you go. Again, try not to knead it, just press it together or pat it together. Then pat it out to a rectangle shape. At this point, the dough shouldn't shrink back on itself. It shouldn't be at all elastic. So as you see here, even though I pushed it out, it didn't shrink back. If you find that your dough is resisting, just let it take a break. Wrap it in cling film and put it in the refrigerator for about 15 to 30 minutes. If it's good to go, then you can tri-fold it or fold it in half. I like to tri-fold it and fold it in half just to give it some texture. And then wrap it in some plastic wrap and then stick it in the fridge for 30 minutes to an hour. Don't forget to clean your work surface. In the meantime, take some ground almond and powdered sugar and your egg whites. with some almond extract. And rose water, which you can find at your local grocery store, usually in the ethnic foods aisle. And mix it all together to a nice paste. This is the almond marzipan that goes inside Stollen. Traditionally, you don't have to put this in if you don't want to, but I kind of like it because it adds sort of a different texture and it adds a lot of almond flavor, which is something that I really love around the holidays. And if you don't have rose water, you don't need to add it. You can always add a teaspoon of water to make it more pasty, or you can even add another teaspoon of almond extract if you really, really like the flavor. This mixture will be very sticky. I decided to put the almond paste in a piping bag, which made it a lot easier to put into the scones. But if you don't have a piping bag, then you can always just use a spoon or a knife to put it into your scones later. After about 30 minutes, I took my dough out of the fridge and it was ready for rolling out. So again, it didn't resist. I could easily pat it out or roll it out into a rectangle and it stayed in that shape. If you find that it's still resisting or shrinking, then stick it back in the fridge and just wait about an hour until it doesn't shrink anymore, or until you can easily roll it out. So I made mine into a rectangle. Doesn't really matter how long it is. I guess this was probably about maybe a little bit larger than a foot long. But it doesn't really matter, just as long as your scones are about 1.5 inches thick when you fold the dough over on itself, then that should be about right. Then squeeze a little bit of your almond paste inside. And then fold the dough over itself. So you can definitely cut this into squares. I decided to go with these really thin triangles for some reason because I thought it might look cool. But you can definitely just roll it back out. You can also chomp these into circles. It might get a little bit messy with the marzipan, so triangles or squares might be good, but it's all up to you. It's all good. They'll all bake the same in the end. Then stick the cut scones on a baking tray lined with parchment. And at this point, your oven should be preheated to 425 degrees Fahrenheit. You don't need to egg wash the tops of these scones because you'll be covering them in butter and powdered sugar. Then you want to bake them for 12 to 15 minutes or until the tops are golden brown. And as usual, use the poke test. Just be careful because these scones will be very hot and steamy. So yeah, just like in a previous video, this is how I kind of gauge to see whether or not the scones are done when you poke them and they spring back a little. Then take some melted butter and brush the tops of each scone. I used salted butter because covering these in powdered sugar, you really needed something to sort of cut that sweetness, so the salted butter really helped to do that. but you can also use unsalted butter if you'd like. Once you've brushed them pretty thoroughly with the melted butter, you can then sift on some powdered sugar. I like to put mine close together so I don't waste a bunch of powdered sugar, but you can do it however you like. And that's it! This is a much quicker recipe than making traditional Stollen. You can make these Stollen scones really fast if you forgot to make your Stollen loaf this year. They're a great replacement and they taste delicious and they're great with a cup of tea. I really hope that you guys enjoyed this video. I hope you all have safe and happy holidays. I hope to see you in the new year. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in my next one.